everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every single one of you that come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, today's guest is someone that we've been in touch with for a while. I've been wanting to speak to her, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome to the podcast Corinne Foxx, an actress, producer, activist, and CEO. She was the executive producer of the Netflix comedy series Dad, Stop Embarrassing Me, which was inspired by her relationship with her dad, Jamie Foxx, who also starred in the series. She's also filming a key recurring role for the second season of the Hulu comedy series Dollface, that me and my wife have been watching, and she's also the co-host and DJ on the hit Fox television show Beat Shazam. In August 2020, she launched her own podcast alongside her best friend called Am I Doing This Right?, which acts as a guidebook for young people on how to kickstart their adulthood, which I love listening to. Corinne, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. First of all, I love the way you said adulthood.
Adult. How do you say it?
Adult.
Adult. Yeah,
no,
we don't say adulthood.
No, you guys say it the right way, 100%.
Do we say it the right way? I'm not sure.
I mean, I think so.
Yeah, we had movies named, so we had Kidulthood, Adulthood. Have you ever seen any of these movies?
No, I've never heard of them.
They're actually really good. They're all about the street culture in London. So.
Oh, no, I've never heard of it.
I forgot that. Yeah, I'm really happy when I get reminded that I still have my British accent.
Oh,
because all my Brit friends are constantly teasing me that I've lost it.
Really?
Yes.
No, I mean, it goes far in America. We're like, what? British accent? Like, I could listen to you all day. Hearing that intro, I'm like, can you read that to me every morning? Please, please.
Well, for me, it's the other way around, because every time I hear something in an American accent, it sounds authoritative. It sounds like a TED talk.
Really?
Yes, because I grew up, when I stepped foot in New York City, when I first moved to America 5 years ago, I was like, I'm in a movie. Because to me, everything looks like a set, because I grew up watching American television.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, New York, when you go to New York, it really does feel like that. Like, it really holds up. And you come to LA, you're like, wait, what? Like, it's not as beautiful as some grimy areas where you're like, this doesn't have that magical New Yorkness to it.
Yeah. Well, you were just saying you loved London. Tell me about your experiences in London. You were there for a movie, you said.
I filmed my movie 47 Meters Down Uncaged, which is a shark movie, but we filmed in these huge tanks in London. But London is my...
What do you mean, explain. Like,
tanks.
Please.
So the entire movie is set underwater. First of all, I lied to the director and told him I knew how to swim when I didn't know how to swim. And, but yeah, they built these huge tanks, where they had these really intricate sets underwater, and we were scuba diving in the movie. We get lost in these caves. And so we spent months under the surface of the water. So we'd go into work at 6 a.m. It was dark. Go underwater, see no light, then come up at like 8 p.m. and I didn't see the sun for months.
Wow.
I know. And I'd have like a little light in my trailer, those like little UV lights, because I was like, this is going to like negatively affect my mental health. So I was like, I would sit and like roast in front of the light at my lunch break.
Wait, you actually didn't see the sun?
Oh, no, I actually didn't for months.
And they did that as part of getting you into character?
No, it was just because we had to shoot underwater. So you go inside, you'd go underwater, you'd come out, it'd be dark, then you'd go do it the next day. And so it was like, yeah, I don't know if I'll ever shoot a movie underwater again. I feel like I got my the taste of it from that.
That's the last time you lied about being able to swim.
Yeah, I'm gonna be truthful. It was my first role, so I was like, I'll do anything. You know, you're like, oh yeah, I can totally swim. I'm such a great swimmer. And then they throw you in the tank the first day, and you're doggy paddling, and they're like, wait, did we cast the wrong girl?
Wait, how quick is that learning curve? Because
when you're swimming for your life, it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick. No, I mean, I had to pass the swim test. The first day I didn't pass it. And they were like, Corinne, get it together. I was just dating my boyfriend at the time, and he's like a lifeguard, like a certified, whatever. And so he was like, okay, these are the techniques to use. He was sending me YouTube videos, and the next day I went and I passed the swim test, and they're like, okay, you can now shoot the movie.
I love that. Yeah, so your boyfriend's like, this is how you pretend to be able to do front stroke. This is backstroke.
No, it was literally treading water. It was how to tread water YouTube videos.
Wow, I love that. That's amazing. What gave you the courage and confidence to be able to say you could do something and then figure it out? Because I think that mindset often works against us. Like, people have imposter syndrome, or they feel, I can't do it, so I can't even put my foot forward. What gave you the confidence to say, I can do that and I'll figure it out, which you did?
I do suffer from imposter syndrome a lot. But honestly, and it sounds tacky, but I really think my dad was a big push in that, and the fact that like my entire life he told me, I mean, this is a big statement, like you can do anything and you're so capable, and like I just heard that constantly. And so when I got offered this role and I didn't know how to swim, I kind of heard him like, well, you can do anything. And I was like, well, I'll figure it out on set, which is what I did. But it was instilled this confidence that like I was capable at a young age, and so I felt confident to do it.
What was your first experience of that, when going back with that father-daughter relationship? Like, when was the first time you felt you were hearing that from him, and what was the first few things you started doing based on that?
I feel like he said it my whole life, and like when you're a child, there's not that many things that you have to meet in that way. I think a lot of that came when I was dating in high school and things like that, and really instilling in me my worth, and just having like little petty high school, breakups and being devastated, and him just being like, there is no man that like can ever take away your self-worth, and like, he always says, do you know who you are? And I don't think he means in like my last name, but like in my essence, and like how powerful of a woman I am. And I just felt that, I think specifically at that age when I really needed like a male voice that was like giving me that confidence, when like, I had little breakups here and there.
Well, you are definitely a powerful person. You're doing so many incredible things. You are producing, you're an activist, you host your own podcast. Tell us about, what are you doing to balance all of that? Because I find that, especially in, your generation, my generation, there's this ambition and drive to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But when you turn it from idea into implementation, things get real. Yeah. How have you managed to be able to dabble in so many things, but still, figure yourself out?
It was tough. And there was recently, I realized, okay, there's a lot on my plate, and there's a lot of different hats I wear, and people. I have to be the producer, and then I have to be the actor, and then I have to be the host, and then I have to be, this, that. And I realized, okay, like I can't do all of this by myself. So I actually this year got a life coach. And I don't know if you've ever had one, been one. I feel like you could be one. I'm a life coach, and we have our own certification school too. Yeah, you're definitely a life coach. Yeah. But really just having someone sit down with me and prioritize, okay, like what do you want to accomplish first, and like how do we get there, and making deadlines, and making I think it's just hard when you have so many passions to figure out like, where do I start? And it's easy to start a bunch of little things and then not really get to the end of them. And so I really needed that structure. So I meet with her every week. We go over my priorities. We figure out what days I'm going to do what. That's a big one, is scheduling in, like, I will send this email at this time. I will do this, because things back up, and it's so easy to get behind. So she's been a godsend, and her plus my therapist equals healthy Corinne.
See, I love that. So I actually want to dive into that, because I think today we're hearing a lot of people you hear say, well, speaking to my therapist, and you just said that obviously you've been figuring out life with your life coach and planning and scheduling. Tell me how you find therapists and coaches help you personally differently, and like you just said, now that healthy Corinne equals plus therapist, which I love. What are they bringing to you that's different from each other? Because I think we're living at a time where people are kind of becoming aware therapy is, but I still feel like coaching is an unknown art.
Yeah, I really didn't even, when I went looking for a life coach, didn't really know even what I was looking for. I just knew I had this need that with my therapist, we go through trauma, we go through, my emotional states and how to like overcome some things. And then I felt like I needed somebody to help me, not an assistant in a way, but someone who was just helping me prioritize, all these projects I had. So I feel like there's like a type A, type B side to, like, my therapist is for my type B creative side that's messy and all over the place. And then my type A side is like my life coach who's like, let's schedule and plan everything.
Yeah, I love that. I've always seen it as therapists help us make sense of what's going on. And then coaches help us make things happen.
Yes, that's a great, simpler way to say it.
Yeah, and it's this idea of like therapists, they help us unpack our past. They help us untangle what's going on. They help us really move on from our past. And then coaches help you go, well, where do you want to be? Yes. Let's use your present to get there.
100%.
And I encourage everyone to have both coaches and therapists in their life, because I think that's a brilliant, what even urged you to go out there? Like, how did you think about that. What was going on in your life where you were like, I need help in my life? Because I think asking for help or looking for help, either from family or friends, sometimes we could even get in our own way. I was speaking to a friend the other day, and he was telling me how someone in his life, just no matter how much he's trying to support or facilitate, that person won't accept help. How do you feel we can all open up to accept more help in our life and know that it's okay to want help?
I think it's a self-worth thing. You know, I feel like a lot of people don't feel worthy of help or don't want to be a burden. And I think for me, I mean, when I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder at age 14, I was the type of person where I was like, I want to go to therapist. I want to do workbooks. I was just very much so like, I don't want to be held back by this. And so I think I applied that later on in life when I was realizing, okay, I'm feeling confused. I'm feeling lost. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to finish things. Like now I need a different form of help. And so I feel like I was just someone who naturally gravitated towards that. But I do think it's about feeling worthy and feeling deserving of help and eliminating that feeling of being a burden on someone else.
Absolutely. I love that. That's such a thoughtful answer. Thank you for that, because I think so many people right now are going to be listening to what you just said. And I'm hoping that if you listen deeply to what Corinne just said, that's going to urge you to break through that. Yeah.
And on the other side of it, I think people love offering help. You know, people want to feel needed and want to feel purposeful. And so you're also giving, you know, people an opportunity to show up for you.
Yeah, I think giving and getting are both privileges, right? Yeah. It's like that idea of if you have something to give and you're able to give, that's an honor.
Yeah.
And for someone else to have someone to give that's ready to receive, that's an honor too. And I think you forget that. So I love that. You spoke earlier about your father and the advice he gave you and how that's kept you going. But then you also have a show called Dad, Stop Embarrassing Me. so Dad's on one end, it's like, oh, Dad gave me this really good advice. Yeah. And that's like, Dad, stop embarrassing me. How many times have you felt both those emotions in the same day?
Every day, every single day. No, I mean, my dad and I have such a funny, like, yin-yang relationship where he is this, like, over-the-top, performative guy who's drawing attention to himself all the time. And I was, you know, more reserved and quiet growing up. And so there was just this perfect storm for him to embarrass me. And because he's drawing attention to himself all the time, when you're a teenage girl, that's the last thing you ever want your dad to do, regardless of if he's famous or not. You want your dad to fly under the radar. And so we had all these funny moments of like him doing too much or showing up at like my cheerleading game wearing like super tight clothes and me being like, that's so embarrassing. And so we just wrote episodes and pitched it to Netflix and they loved it. And so it was such a cathartic thing for the both of us, because at the time I was really embarrassed. You know, it wasn't a joke at the time. When you're 16, 17, it feels like the end of the world. So it was like full circle for us to look back and like laugh at these things that maybe at the time weren't as funny.
Yeah, I love that. The thing I love most about it is I'm not a dad yet, but I can imagine that when I become a dad, and if I'm lucky enough to have a daughter, then I feel like I'm gonna be doing crazy things.
Right?
Yeah. Like, what would be your advice to people who are about to become dads, of the warnings of what are the things that embarrass and what are the things that are good?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think that is part of your job description as a dad. Like, embarrassing your child, I think it's part of it. I think it's a rite of passage for kids to go through. So I don't really want to steer away from it, but I would say in my dad's experience, my dad was very, he liked to pretend he was a bad cop with boyfriends.
Yes, I can imagine doing that.
And he's not at all. He's like he's an actor. I mean, he cries all the time. He's like not like that at all, but he loved to like put on the, you know, I'm going to bring my shotgun, you know, that whole thing. And that was just like, Dad, I'm learning. Just give me the space to just grow and figure this out. You don't have to fight my battles for me. We have an episode on the show. It's episode 2, I think, where he goes like knocking on the boyfriend's door with all of his friends. And he really did that in real life to my high school boyfriend. He went knocking on his door to try to, I don't know, scare him off. I don't know what to do. I was like,
that's amazing. Yeah. What do you think it is when, as kids, I feel like when we're growing up, sometimes we're embarrassed of them, sometimes we're embarrassed for them, sometimes we're embarrassed for ourselves. Yeah. But then as we grow older, I feel like a lot of us develop a sense of gratitude and connection. Was there ever a time where you felt you were bitter or resentful towards your parent? Not for anything legitimate, but just as a young kid growing up where you really just don't, how were you able to overcome that? How do you think that healed over time when you kind of like, oh, I really wish they didn't do that, something more serious, not as funny?
Yeah.
And then how do you kind of overcome that as an adult?
Yeah, well, my dad just put out a book that he talks about in the book. We went to therapy together when I was in high school, or maybe in college, because we were kind of butting heads a lot, and I felt like he really didn't understand me. And so I feel like for me, I was really lucky because both my parents listened to me, and they were able to like at least let me have my platform, even if they didn't understand. And I think it's very normal as a kid to go through the, like, my parents don't get me and they don't get what I want to do. And we definitely had those moments where, you know, and it's funny to say this, but going to college, my dad went to college but didn't graduate. So he didn't really understand like how impactful that was going to be for me. And that was actually a point of contention for us, where I was like, I'm going to college. And he's like, why? You don't have to go. Like, you can just get into the industry. And I was like, no, this is what I want to do, and I need you to respect this, which sounds crazy to be telling a parent that, but he didn't really understand. And those were times where I was like, you just have to listen to me. And then when I graduated, he was like crying, and he was like, oh my God, like, of course, this is such a huge accomplishment. And I just didn't understand like what this meant to you. And I do now.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting to just hear about relationships and ups and downs, because I think everyone's kind of on their own journey, and everyone who's listening and watching has a different experience or position with their family. And I think hearing this, I think what I've always found that when I hear about positive experiences of parenting or anything, I always think for people, I'm like, if you didn't get that, try and be that.
Yes.
And that's how you also get to experience that. Because I think about them, like, there may be a lot of people listening going, well, I didn't get that, I wish I had that. And I'm like, but then we can have that opportunity to go and be that and try and have that experience that way, so that you still get to experience it in your life. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that just goes to so many other things too, like healing your own trauma so that you don't, you know, continue to pass it on to, you know, generations. And I feel like our generation is a lot more aware of, you know, our mental health and the things that have happened to us, and like healing them now so we don't pass them on later, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you for including me in your generation. Yeah. You're much younger than me.
I don't think so.
Like, yes.
You're a millennial.
Yes.
Okay, we're millennials.
Okay. All right. But that's a great segue, because months ago you posted on your Instagram Corinne's Guide to Wellness.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I loved what you were sharing there. I wanted to know, where did you come up with that list from, and how did it develop, and why did you feel the need to share it too? Because I think that was so powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I mean, my mental health journey started when I was 14, when I was diagnosed with anxiety. And at the time, there was no conversation for mental health. There was no hashtags. There was no social media. There was no brands doing self-care Sunday. Like, that just wasn't a thing. And so I had to spend many years just doing a lot of my own research on what anxiety was and how to treat it and what worked for me. So over time, I developed this list in my phone, which is what you're referring to. I just screenshotted it, posted on my Instagram, of things that worked for me and like what made me feel better. And it was like working out, going to therapy. And it's very specific for me. It's like 1 to 2 times a week, you know, and I don't recommend it. And I think I wrote, like, I don't recommend that for everyone, but I just started writing things. Oh, working out works. Oh, going to therapy works. Oh, journaling works for me. Oh, meditating works for me. And I would just keep adding to my list so that, you know, when you're in a really anxious moment or you're going through a tough time, it's hard to remember all of the tools you have. You're like, I don't remember anything. So it was nice for me to have it in my phone so I could reference it, you know, if I needed it.
When you went through it at 14, what were the conversations like at school, or like with friends, or with even your parents? Like, I can imagine that. I agree with you that now we're living at a time where you just open up a social media app and there'll be someone talking about mental health, or someone sharing something, or a brand's doing something, or there's an event for mental health. There's more therapists and coaches in the world. At that point, tell me how that dialogue went for you in terms of getting the diagnosis and then figuring out next steps. And how did people respond at school? What did kids know? Did your friends know? Like,
no, I didn't feel comfortable enough to share it. I was really, really ashamed of it. And I felt like I didn't want to be called the C word, which is crazy. And because I didn't really know what it was and people weren't talking about it. So I went years where I didn't tell any of my friends. I immediately told my parents, though, because it got to the point where I didn't want to go to school. I was so anxious that I couldn't even sit in a classroom. So I knew in my head, okay, something's wrong. I know other kids can't be feeling this way. And that's how I got started going to therapy. I've had the same therapist since I was 14. I love this woman so much. But
I love that.
yeah, but no, it took me a long time to be able to like, and it sounds weird, but like come out and say I have anxiety. And I did that through an article I wrote for Refinery 29 in like 2017, 2018. And I was terrified. I was really terrified to tell the world that I had anxiety, which sounds great. Not to use the C word, but it sounds, unbelievable now because there's so much of a conversation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were you experiencing then? Like when you said you were anxious to go to school, what did that feel like and what did that mean at that time for you?
There was a lot of physical anxiety symptoms. So it was like my palms were sweating, my heart's beating out of my chest. I keep thinking that a plane is going to hit the school. Like these irrational fears and thoughts and panic attacks and things like that. I struggled with panic disorder for a long time. 75% of mental health conditions start between the age of 14 and 24. So I was like right on par, like 14 years old, it just, showed up and I've been in therapy ever since.
Yeah, no, but it's incredible that you've been able to find the advice, seek the advice, build it, then be honest about sharing it, especially at a time when it is hard as a 14-year-old to not know what's going on. Then you can't talk to your friends about it because you don't know how they're going to react and what words they're going to use. And then you've got the added challenge of like, well, now my parents know because they have to know. And where's this going? But it sounds like when I look at that Corinne's Guide to Wellness and I look at things like socializing with friends twice a week, right? You also said giving back once a month, which I want to dive into some of those. But I love what you said. And you said it so simply, but it's actually so profound. You just said, I was creating a toolkit for myself because when you're feeling anxious, you forget what to do.
Oh yeah.
But then when you go to your toolkit, you're like, oh, this is the stuff I need to do. And I think that's such a great way of putting it for anyone and everyone. It's like you have to create a guide when you're not experiencing anxiety, so that when you're in anxiety, you know what to look at.
Exactly.
Let's dive into some of those. When you say socializing with friends twice a week, what was the type of socializing that helped you relieve anxiety versus what type of socializing actually created more of it?
Right, like being in college and going to a college party maybe isn't the type of socializing that's going to relieve anxiety, but like meaningful conversations, movie nights, going out to dinner, just being with like a close-knit group of friends. That definitely doesn't refer to just like hitting the town. Maybe that works for some people. Again, it's like for me, but for me, it was just having real conversations and just, being in company. I think when you feel anxious or depressed, you tend to go inward, and I realized, okay, I have to force myself to go outwards, when I'm not feeling well.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes you think you've seen that parents make? Like, so maybe there's parents listening to this, young parents or parents with young kids listening to the podcast right now. What are some of the things that you think are really hard when your child's going through it, but from a child's perspective or a teenager's perspective who's experiencing anxiety, what are some of the things parents can do better? And what are some of the mistakes you've seen people made, especially through your ambassador and activist work? I'm sure you're hearing a lot of teenagers say, well, my parents don't understand this, or my parents are pushing this. What are some of the things you can give us to think about?
I'm not a parent, so I don't know. I think what my parents did really great is hearing me and then, coming up like, what are we going to do now? And making me feel like really safe in the fact that they were going to, find me someone to talk to and like, get me there and things like that. But I also really wanted to go to therapy. And so I don't know if like forcing a child who's not ready, I saw that with other friends of mine really backfire and put a bad taste in their mouth for therapy later on. And so I think it's really like just being present, listening to what your child needs. And if they're coming to you, like feeling honored, because it takes a lot to share with your parents, especially at that age when you are kind of starting to really want your own independence. It's like, now I have to lean on my parents more. Yeah. And so, I think another thing, and this isn't just parents, but this is like everyone is being like, oh, well, that's normal. Or that's, everyone feels that way, and not validating someone's reality. I think that's something I seem to be very detrimental for people.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. And yeah, I completely agree. I know you're not a parent, but I always feel like it's interesting for parents to hear it from kids.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we've all been children. And I feel like we forget that when we become an adult or you become a parent, and so to hear it from and even what you shared about your friends and saying like, actually, what we don't want is that everyone listens to this podcast and then goes to their kid and says, you need to go to therapy. Look what, you know, and then that kid's like, but I don't want to go to therapy. And then what you just said, that when someone feels forced to do that, that actually ruins that experience for them even in the future. And so I think that's a great insight that I think could easily be missed, because I think a lot of people do hear a piece of advice and then go, okay, well, that's what my kid needs to do. But being present, listening, as you said.
Yeah, and there's other like outlets for anxiety. There's, you know, music, or there's, you know, like there's other things. Like I really loved journaling as a kid. Like I just grew up doing it. I still do it now. And like that was so cathartic for me and almost as healing as therapy. And so like if that's not the thing, and this is the whole thing when I talk about mental health, it's trial and error, right? Like it doesn't work for everyone. And so you have to try one thing and be like, oh, okay, that didn't work. Let me try this. And that's how my list was created. Was I did a million other things besides the 10 things on there that didn't work.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Me and my wife actually started a new, I don't know, maybe when this is out, it will already be, maybe not. We've been doing a new series of doing things together that's meant to relieve your anxiety.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Yeah, and so we went last week, this video is not out yet, but we went to a break room. I don't know if you've ever been to a break room.
Oh, where you hit things.
Where you hit things. So we were not feeling stressed or anxious that day, and actually being with my wife is like one of my favorite things. Like I love filming with her. I'm always just like, if I could just be with you all day, it'd be amazing. And so we're off there to this rage room to break stuff.
Yeah.
And we walk into this room and it literally feels like I'm in a set of the movie Saw. You know,
oh my
like
gosh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so you walk in, and then you see all these like computers there, there's bottles, there's everything, and then there's like all these different baseball bats and lead pipes and all this kind of stuff.
You want to be in there with the wrong person.
Yeah, you don't want to be in there. And the thing is, you know what was really interesting? Me and my wife went in there, and we walked out feeling more anxious than we did walking in, because we realized that we don't like breaking stuff during that. But even if I was stressed, I was like, I don't really want to break stuff. We were like, my wife's holding the bottle, and you know what my wife's like. And she's holding the bottle, and she's like, she doesn't want to break it.
Yeah,
and then I'm like trying to break stuff, and I'm using all my force, but I'm like, this is not making me happy. It's actually giving me anxiety. And then I read a study afterwards that said, if you're anxious before, it relieves it, but if you're not anxious before, it creates it. And I was like, I should have learned this before.
I picked the wrong day.
I picked the wrong day. And the funniest thing was when we came out, I was talking to the lady who, was there and knew about the experience. And she was saying that people come there when they get divorced or breakups. And then they often put like pictures of the person. And then, and I was like, oh, that makes sense now. I get it. But again, it's like different things work for different people. That day we also did a splatter room, which is where you get lots of paint. And you get to paint canvases.
That's cool.
And it was so fun. Like we were both just like, I would do this every week, because it was so nice to make a mess without it having any repercussions.
Right.
That's what
it's like a different type of mess than the one before.
Totally.
And no, I will say though, for one of my self-care tools is like whenever I had a breakup, I always took up boxing at that time. Okay. And and it was very cathartic. You picture your ex's face and you just punch it, and so, but exactly when you're in that space, when you need that outlet, it makes sense. But when you're just going in, it's like, this feels not good to me.
Yeah, exactly. Going to a more beautiful one, giving back once a month. I wanted to ask you about that. Like, first of all, when did you discover that was something that really helped you? And give me some examples of the things you've done over time, especially when you were younger and now today as well. Like, what are some of the things that you've done that you felt were really a big part of that giving back that made a difference?
Yeah, I mean, my philanthropic work and my advocacy work is some of my favorite work that I do. And so because I am an ambassador for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and because I work with other organizations, like I get to do that on a large scale very often now. But before, it was just something I had to put in my schedule. When I was at USC, I used to just volunteer at a local homeless shelter every Sunday or Saturday morning. And I just, give them meals and things like that. And so I think just thinking outside of yourself, because again, when you're anxious or you're depressed or whatever, you get so consumed and you get stuck in a rut in your head. And when you think outside of yourself, like, oh, someone else's needs right now. And at least for 30 minutes, an hour, like you're not worried about yourself. You're not worried about all the things that are making you feel anxious or depressed or whatever. And so I found that to be very healing for me. And then now to be able to do that on a large scale and speak with NAMI and lobby Congress and all that stuff, it's giving back on, a bigger scale, but it still provides relief for me.
Yeah, I love that. And all the studies back that up and show that. Like, even when we're experiencing anxiety and stress, when we go and relieve the anxiety and stress of others or feel like we're working on that, it massively impacts how we feel.
Yeah.
So that's such a great example.
Not to just do things for myself, but it does, there is a reciprocal thing when you're, giving back. You're also, and we said that earlier, you're also, getting something from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're in some of those rooms, like when you're lobbying Congress or like standing up for a right, or do you ever feel like, are you ever like, what am I doing? Like, I can't believe I'm here. Like, from having experienced anxiety to now, like, being an activist. And that's an amazing journey in and of itself. Yeah.
When I lobbied Congress with NAMI, and I remember we were getting off the bus at DC to walk up the steps of the Capitol, I was like, every anxious moment, panic attack was worth it to be standing here, because I felt like, you have very few moments in your life where you feel like everything's come to this moment. And there were days where like the struggle was real. I was really having panic attacks. I really didn't want to go to school. I really didn't want to do these things. There was a time in which I couldn't leave my house. And it was just like, wow, to go through all of that, to overcome it all, and then to be standing here and championing for somebody else, like it just makes it feel like it wasn't for nothing,
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. I love that journey, because I think when you can see it, and wherever you are, if anyone who's listening or watching right now, wherever you are on that journey of you from school to the Capitol is full of tiny little steps.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it does not happen overnight.
Yeah, it's just these tiny little steps, these tiny shifts, these tiny changes, and then you get this big moment where you get to stand up for something you believe in, which is beautiful. One of the other habits that you wrote down, which I loved, was God, Spirit, Connect, Church on Sunday. And I was thinking, is that something that's been a part of your life since you were...
Yeah, I was raised, my mom was a very new age growing up, and so at the time, like law of attraction and all that stuff was like very woo-woo, and I didn't really tell kids at school that that's really what we were doing at home, but now of course everybody in LA does it, but which I love, but it was like very normal for me. We used to go to Agape, I don't know if you know, and so I grew up there, like going to their kids' room, and so I still watch it now, even though it's virtual. But yeah, I think my meditation practice too is like a huge part of my mental health toolkit, and just sitting and getting quiet and connecting and feeling like there's something else, or there's meaning to all of this, for me is really relieving.
Yeah, and has that been a habit that you've continued even during the pandemic, I guess you're saying, virtually? Or, how has that been sustained during this time? Because I feel like being present with people is such a beautiful way for that connection. Yeah,
it's tough when you can't be in the room, but I do virtual like meditation classes with Unplug, and I just do virtual everything.
I love it. Yeah, that's amazing. It takes a bit of, I was actually saying that I set up with two of my close friends, we set up meditation communities together during the pandemic.
Oh, that's so cool.
Me, them, and then their friends, their family, every week on Zoom, we meditate together. I guide the meditations. And it's just been so beautiful and meaningful, because we've got all these amazing friendships that have come out of this Zoom. And I didn't even know half the people on there. I didn't know anyone on there actually beyond this person. And now a year and a half later, I literally feel like I've got all these new friends.
No, it's so weird how like you make these Zoom friendships, because we had to. Like I this is nothing like what you were just saying, but I was in like a French course over this last year, and like these two girls on my French course, I just flew out to Boston to meet them in real life, because I was like, I feel like you're my real friends. And people are like, you've never met in person. I'm like, but you could have, after a year of Zooming with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to get creative in that way.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that. I found that what was really fascinating is I found that if you do something meaningful in the center of a group of people, whether it's virtual or physical, you create an amazingly deep bond.
Yeah.
But if you do something meaningless, whether it's physical or virtual, you actually don't feel close to those people.
Right.
And so it's like the reason you're coming together is actually so much more important than even coming together.
Right.
And I saw that just transform so much of my life in the last 18 months, where relationships came from places I didn't expect them to, because I didn't realize that even if you did something virtually, but it was powerful and meaningful and purposeful, the quality of that relationship was far greater than if you just hung out on a Zoom.
Right.
And so, yeah, anyway, I don't know if that's useful.
No, it was. No, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. When do you feel, we were talking about this earlier, and we've really talked about your mental well-being and your journey with that, but you're such a creative, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's like DJing, whether it's producing, writing, I want to know, when do you feel most creative? And what do you feel is your greatest superpower when it comes to creativity? And when you access it, you're like, oh, I felt that.
That's tough, because I feel like my creativity manifests in so many different ways. I'm an actor and I'm a writer as well. And I consider myself a dancer. I'm not professional by any means, but I grew up dancing. That was like my first performative love. And so I feel like my most creative, honestly, when I'm alone, like I really get into this, and maybe it's that like tortured artist thing that you kind of have to do. But really when I'm alone and I sit and I get quiet, and in my meditations, that's where my podcast came from. I was sitting in meditation and I like opened my eyes and I'm like, I have to do a podcast. And you know what I mean? Like you kind of just hear things. And so I think for me, and I'm so lucky that my partner, my boyfriend, he understands that like for me to be creative, like I have to really sink in. And before I have auditions or before I go, on set, like I have to kind of have the day before to really I think it's just really getting connected with yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's why I need that quiet alone space. And so I think eliminating distractions for me is a big thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm the same. Like before something big, whatever that may be, for me it's the same. I need to be alone. It needs to be quiet. I need to be in my own thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't want any distractions. So I relate to that fully, and I find that it's important. What you just said there is a really big lesson. Like with the people that you love around you, it's important you explain that to them, because otherwise they just start to think like they're doing something wrong, or like they don't understand you, or they've made a mistake. And it's so important, like what you just explained, that, my boyfriend understands that when this is happening, that this is what I need.
Yeah.
I think that's such a healthy way of communicating.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that my boyfriend is also a writer and director. It also needs like his own time. So it's like we're a great match.
Yeah.
But explaining to him like, hey, it's not you, but like if I have an audition, like the night before, like, I need my time. I have to get into the character, and like I'll call you right when I'm out,
Yeah. And I love that the name of the podcast is exactly the sentence you would say during meditation. Am I doing this right? Yeah. I mean, it's a question we ask for a lot of things, but because you said you got the idea while you were meditating, I was just like, yes, there are many times in meditation where the thought in my head is, am I doing this right?
Oh, yeah. And I always tell people when they are afraid to start meditation, I'm like, there is no right way to do it. Yeah. It's not. I used to think meditation was levitating in your living room and like, rising from the ground. And I was like, no, if you could just get quiet for like 2 minutes, 1 minute, like, and then now I'm like, I sit for 30 minutes every day. But a lot of people think, am I doing this right? Is this how it's supposed to feel? Like, am I supposed to have like some profound, that my epiphany is not my normal meditation.
Tell me about that meditation practice. You said you went from like 1 to 2 minutes to now 30 minutes a day. Like, what does that look like? What are you doing for that 30 minutes? What time of day it is, and how are you practicing that?
I wake up first thing in the morning, let my dog out, and then that's when I meditate. We get back inside. And I mean, it started with just sitting for 10 minutes and just learning how to follow my breath, which is great for anybody who's experiencing anxiety, because when you can, when you can lower your breath, you lower your heart rate, and a lot of your anxiety symptoms go away. So that was like almost like being very practical anxiety relief that helped me. But then I started to really love the spiritual side of it, and then it grew, and now I have crystals and there's sage, and it's a whole thing. It's a production. Yeah. It takes a long time. My dog's sitting there like, really? We have to do all of this every time?
I love that. That's so important though, because that creates so much like a foundation in your day and a certainty, and like it creates an environment that you love walking into. And
it's just like the best way for me to get in the right headspace to do things like this, to go out in the world. And I'm an introvert, so I have to like charge up before I go out.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Let's talk about that, because I reckon everyone who's listening to this going, you guys are not introverts.
You're not an introvert.
I am.
No way.
Yeah, definitely. Like I have to like self-preserve so much to have energy. And if I go to an event, if it's my event, it's different. But if I'm going to an event, I will just try and find one person to have a deep, meaningful conversation with. I won't introduce myself to everyone not because I'm anxious or scared by it, but I just really like deep connection more than I love, wide connection, I guess. And that idea of just being able to have like lots of small talk throughout the night just doesn't fulfill me in the same way. And I feel like I spent a lot of my life being an extrovert during my teens, but then I feel like I became more and more of an introvert because I realized the value of being alone, especially when it came to making big decisions, especially when it came to like sticking to my guns on an idea I had and no one agreed with me. And as I started to realize that the more time I spent with people, the more their voice became louder. And I was like, no, but I want to follow my heart. Like, so I feel like with all of that, like my favorite thing to do without a doubt on a weekend is sit with a bunch of books, make notes, read, listen, learn. Like I do that. If my wife's traveling or not with me, I would literally just do that, and I'll order in.
That's my favorite.
Like, that's my favorite thing to do. You too?
Yeah. Same, exactly. Like I feel like I'm an extroverted introvert where I can go out.
It's all coming out now.
Yeah, it can be on, but then I have to go home and I can't see people for like 3 days, and I have to like completely go inward. And so it's just about charging, and then like going out and feeling purposeful when you are out, like, and having meaning when you're out, and not just I too get drained with just like, hey, how are you doing? What's the weather? All of that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's why your podcast is great, because you're asking the question, am I doing this right? And I think that question is that question is like, we ask it to ourselves all the time. Like I'll be sitting as an interviewer going, am I doing this right? Am I asking the right questions? And I do it when I'm an interviewee. Yeah. If I'm being interviewed, I'm sitting there going, am I doing this right? And then it happens when I'm writing my book. It happens when it's a question that we ask again and again and again. What have you discovered by asking that question, by sitting and having these amazing discussions on the podcast? What have you learned about that question and understanding what is right?
It's very simple, is that no one knows what they're doing and no one thinks they're doing it right. And I think that's what's really bonded us with our listeners, because I think they were like, okay, finally someone else is like admitting that like we have no idea what we're doing, and we're supposed to pretend like we know how to do these things. Ours is like our podcast is a life how-to podcast. So we go through very confusing things in adulthood that you think you're supposed to know, but you don't really. Like, how do I file my taxes? What is a 401k? I don't know. All these things that you're supposed to know, and you don't, and you're never taught in school. And it's like, okay, we're going to stop pretending that we have it all figured out, and we're going to admit, at least me and my co-host, my best friend Natalie, are going to admit we don't know anything, and we'll figure it out for you.
Yeah, I love that, because even for me, when I moved to the US, I had to learn a whole new...
Oh, yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know if you even know what a 401k is.
No, I do now. But it was like when I moved to the US, so in the UK, I relied on my mom, because my mom was like a financial advisor.
That's what my mom is.
Really? No way.
My mom's an accountant.
Oh, yeah, and my dad's an accountant, so I was like, okay, they've got me covered, they'll figure it out. And then I moved here, and I was like, oh. And then I was like trying to get help from them, but none of them could help me because everything's different over here.
Yeah.
And so, I've had to learn about every aspect of it, which... it is so complex if you haven't learned it at school. I wonder whether you're going to do a crypto episode.
We did a crypto episode.
Amazing. Okay.
It's literally called A Preschooler's Guide to Crypto.
I love it.
And like when I tell you, we like are hand holding you, because it was something people have been talking about. They use big words, and me and my best friend are like, she's an art major. Like we don't know any of this. We're creative people. And so we were like, we'll look it up and we'll explain it to you. We also like drink a glass of wine every episode, so it's fun and it's not like a boring TED talk. So, we want it to be like you're going to drinks with your girlfriend and you're like, hey, like what's crypto? And you're like, oh, it's this, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And that's awesome. And I think that's how we all want to learn.
Yeah.
Like, we all learn more through conversation than we do through like whiteboards and whatever it may be. And that sort of approach. But what's been the most popular episode? I'm intrigued. I always ask that question to someone who has a podcast, because I'm intrigued to hear about what people are like really like wanting to learn. What's been your most popular conversation that you've had?
We did an episode on morning routines, and we researched how billionaires start their day. And that one got a lot of hits. I think we don't only do like personal finance. We started that way, then we were like, wait, there's a lot of other things in adulthood like we need to figure out, which is like morning routines, nighttime routines, we just did an episode on going to therapy. But that one we got a lot of hits on, I think, because I don't know, people want to have successful mornings. Like we were saying, like me meditating in the morning, like starts my day off for success. So very interesting.
Yeah. Oprah
wakes up at 6:10 a.m. naturally without an alarm clock, which I was like, I can never do that, Oprah.
I love that. Yeah, no, I've read those. There's such incredible ones, because I found that, I think it was like, and I might be getting this wrong, but I remember when I looked at that, it was like 63% of the most successful people in the world get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep. They're actually getting their sleep, contrary to popular belief, which is that you have to sleep 4 hours if you want to be successful.
No, a lot of them do. A lot of them woke up later than I did. I think somebody, and I don't want to say it was Elon Musk, it was someone else, like woke up at 10 or something. I was like, wow, like they're really getting a lot of sleep.
You're like, I should just wake up at 10. Why am I waking up early for? No, I think these things are so important to study. And I was saying this to someone earlier today that, so a lot of people today, we struggle because we're like, oh, well, we don't want to be compared to this ideal, or like, why are we looking at what others are doing? But the truth is that you have two options when you're looking at success. You either look at success with envy or you look at success with study. But we both have to look at it. So some people are looking at everyone going, oh, I wish I had that, or, oh God, why are they trying to be perfect or whatever. Or we can look at it and say, well, what can I learn from that?
Yeah.
Like how do I apply that to my life? And I feel like studying healthy, wealthy, and wise individuals is a great way to live, because it helps you figure out what parts of it you want to apply to your life.
Yeah. No, 100%. And like I said, like I'm not going to naturally wake up at 6 a.m. It's just, I'm going to need an alarm clock. But it's just, one, it's interesting. Yeah. And two, I think you can start to like find little things that you can apply here and there. And the rest of the episode goes into just like healthy morning habits. We only use like .govs, .org, so we don't just like pull from, a random article, but we find things that have, real science behind it.
Yeah. What's been a habit or a principle or a way someone lives, or even a financial thing that surprised you, where you're like, that's so cool, like I didn't know that? Is there anything that stood out like that? I'll share one while you're thinking. For me, it was, we had Ross on the podcast, and I was obviously asking him questions about creativity and music, and he was saying that his favorite thing to do, and we'll both align with this, he was saying his favorite thing to do is get all of his friends out of the studio, not invite anyone over, go into the basement or go into the studio and make weird sounds that he would only make if he was on his own.
That is
And so he literally like yells into the microphone, he makes a weird sound, he screams, and he goes, if I had my friends in there, I would feel so judged that I wouldn't do that. So he goes, for me, the best creativity is being alone and just making weird noises. And then I'll discover something like, oh, I want to find an instrument like that.
No, that's really, really interesting. No, I mean, I haven't had anything like that on our podcast yet. I'm trying to think. I mean, like, this was not as cool at all, so I don't want to say it.
Go on.
No, we were really surprised. We were looking up also, like, in this morning routines episode, like, what a lot of people eat in the morning. Okay. And you've been, like, sold that you need to have, like, bacon and eggs. Most people have oatmeal. And I was like, I don't like oatmeal, but maybe I should try eating oatmeal, because most billionaires eat oatmeal.
Do you know why that makes me really happy? I've been eating oatmeal my whole life for breakfast.
Really?
Yeah, I recently switched to chia pudding because I found out that I have a slight allergy to oats.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, so I switched to chia pudding, which is actually much nicer. So
Okay, well, you're already on your way. I mean, you're already incredible.
Chia pudding, blueberries, strawberries.
That's your morning.
Amazing. It's such a great.
Okay, I need to be on that.
Yeah, and like you said, it's all personal. Like, like I did a micronutrient test recently, which is what helped me realize that I have a slight allergy to oats. But also, like, oats was leaving me feeling bloated or uncomfortable, whatever it may be. Whereas chia seed pudding has been amazing for me. So.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to redefine what billionaires eat in the morning.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be oatmeal. It
doesn't have to be. And like everyone makes, and that's the whole thing with like my toolkit and like that's like it's a choose your own adventure thing. But I think when you have the knowledge of what to do, that empowers you to make the most conscious decision for yourself.
Yeah. What are you most excited about? What you're creating right now? Like, what's a role that you're playing that you've just deeply dived into and you're just feeling it, or even if there's something coming up that you're just like, this is challenging me in a way that I know I'm growing?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure by the time this comes out, this will be news. I just sold my first TV show.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, two weeks ago. And so that has been such a journey for me. I've been working on the show for like 5+ years. I wrote it. I created it.
Are you in it too?
I'm in it as well. And so I just sold it. And so I think for me, this is like this new challenge for me. I've EP'd a show before, the one on Netflix, That's Stop Embarrassing Me, but I've never been the creator and the writer and the EP and the actor. So it's going to be this whole new ball game for me. And so, I'm really excited to go down the path. I'm terrified, but again, to circle back to the beginning, like I feel like I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course you can. And congratulations.
Thank you.
I love that you shared that with us. And I love that because you're taking on just so much. I mean, to write, create, direct, and be in it. Which part of it do you enjoy the most, or is that a bad question?
They stretch different muscles.
Tell me about what they stretch, because I get that. Like, what does each part of it do for you personally?
I'm a very type A, type B person, so I need the like rawness, and then the role in the show for myself is, she has this beautiful journey and this beautiful evolution of self and discovery, and so like to be able to be in her shoes, I'm so excited to do. But then also like from my producer side, like my type A side, like I can't wait to get everything in line and like get our cast set, and like I like checking boxes, and so like that's gonna give me that's gonna like feed that side of myself. So it's like this perfect balance of like my creativity's just being stretched in both ways. Life coach and therapist is really what it is.
There you go. I love it. What do you think is the most scariest thing you've ever taken on, or the most like challenging thing you've ever taken on? Is this going to be it, or what's up till now? What's been that thing, personal or professional?
Personal, there's been a few, but I would say professional. I did a live special on ABC of Good Times. It was a live performance. We were doing a one night only thing with Jimmy Kimmel was hosting it. Viola Davis was playing my mother. I was playing like an iconic character, Thelma Evans, and it was terrifying. Also, Tiffany Haddish was in the cast, and it was an incredible cast. And then like imposter syndrome, me, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I've never done a play before, and essentially this is what this is, and it's live for millions of people. So it was absolutely terrifying, but the way I coped. with that fear was to come in so prepared that nothing could shake me. I knew this performance frontwards, backwards. I did it every day, 10 times a day. My boyfriend was like going to go crazy because I was just saying my lines, but it worked out because you get there and you're nervous and you're like, at least I know my lines.
Totally, I remember that. Except the funny thing for me is, and I'm sure you've experienced this, whenever you turn up with all that prep and knowing your lines, they always change your lines on the day.
Oh yeah, and you're like,
they give you a new script.
Luckily, we were going from original episode, so we weren't going to go from script, but that does always happen.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, because I always get there, I'm like, but having said all of that, what you just said is spot on, that when you've done that prep, you actually feel like you can adapt to whatever's thrown at you.
Right. And that's what I've learned with being an actor. It's like when you really know your script, that's when you can play. But when you're sitting there remembering your lines, you're not present, you're not in the scene. And so like I applied that there, which was an acting thing. And I was just like, the more I know my lines, the more fun I'm going to have doing this, because this is the scariest thing I've ever done.
I love that. All right. Corinne, I could carry on talking to you for fun for hours and hours and hours, but we end every episode of On Purpose with the final 5.
Okay.
So these are the fast 5. Questions have to be 1 word to 1 sentence maximum.
Okay.
So it can be whatever a sentence is, I don't know. Okay. 7 words, 9 words, I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, so the first question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Always save a little love for yourself.
Oh, I love that. That's I've never heard that before. That's beautiful. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
That wearing Uggs was a good idea.
Tell us why.
Because I have a lot of horrible red carpet moments from when I was 10 years old, and I look back and I'm like, why would I wear Uggs on a red carpet?
You were 10. You didn't choose those, did you? Or you did?
I probably did. I don't know.
I love that. All right. What gets you excited when you're waking up out of bed every morning?
My sisters.
Tell us more. I'm gonna.
I know. Explain.
Yeah. You don't have to. I'm intrigued.
My sisters are 13 and 14, and I look forward to hearing about their days every day, because they're at this pivotal age, really the age where I was diagnosed with anxiety, and to see them growing and changing every day, it makes me so excited. And also, I'm just so hopeful with all of Gen Z. They're incredible. I'm like, you guys have it way more put together than we do.
I love that. Question number 4. What is your current purpose? So how would you define your current purpose?
Being a voice for those that feel silenced.
I love that. 5th question. If you could, and this can be going longer, if you could meet your younger self again today, your 14-year-old self, what would you tell her?
It's funny because I answered this question today, but I would tell her it gets better. I was also bullied in high school, and there was a time in which you feel like it's the end of the world, and I wish I could go back to that girl and be like, it doesn't really get better, it gets spectacular, and it keeps going, and you're only going to go up from here. And I think when you're that age, everything feels like the end of the world, and it isn't, and yeah, it hasn't been.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Corinne, thank you so much for being so vulnerable, so open, so generous with your time and also your energy. And I think everyone who's going to listen to this is going to have a great time. I think there's moments where we're laughing. There's moments where people are having really profound moments. And I love what I really admire about you is just how focused you are on your well-being and yourself. And I find that that's such a brilliant foundation for all the success you're creating from it, because often you find that people are doing a lot of successful things, they're making things happen, but their personal health and wellness is kind of all over the place. And so I really appreciate that, and I think you're setting a wonderful example of how that's the foundation of everything that's to come.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was such an honor. Yeah. Seriously, I can't believe I was on your podcast again. Oprah was on your podcast. How am I on your podcast?
No, you're here because you are showing all generations to come just how to figure out our life step by step, keep that love for ourselves, remove that self-judgment, beat that imposter syndrome. I mean, this is exactly what we all need to hear. If you've been listening or watching at home, I want to make sure that you tag me and Corinne on Instagram, on Twitter, on any platform you're listening on, and let us know what were the takeaways, what were the nuggets of wisdom that Corinne said that you're going to repeat. Maybe you're going to say it to yourself, maybe you're going to say it to your kids, maybe you're going to say it to your parents, whoever you're going to say it to. Please do tag both of us, because I love seeing what you're learning and what you're taking away. Corinne, any final words or anything you want to share?
Oh my God. Again, this has been such an honor. And I'm such a huge fan of you and your wife. I said that when I first walked in here. I was like, where's your wife?